So to start the video, we're going to just give a disclaimer. This isn't a hobby lathe. This is an industrial lathe. It's extremely powerful. Should be used with great respect, and because the amount of horsepower that's in this, if this chuck is loose and it gives way, it's going to seriously injure you or possibly kill you. So just want to make sure everybody knows that this is definitely not a tool to be taken lightly or think that this is like a hobbyist lathe. This is an industrial lathe with lots of power. Hi, this is Josh, and we're at Makerspace. We're going to do a safety video on the lathe. The lathe has 4 different ways to turn it, to power it up and get it running, and 4 ways to make sure that you don't hurt yourself. Just shows how careful and how much attention you should pay when you're using this piece of machinery. So first off, always wear safety gear. So safety glasses are a must. No gloves, no loose clothing, and if you have long hair, you need to pull it back and make sure that it's not going to get caught in the lathe while it's spinning. There's also, there's a space up here for Allen keys and such. This, when you are actually going to be using the lathe, should all be removed off of it so that there isn't any chance that the tools up here can fall into your work area. So we'll go through the panel here and just kind of give you an overview of what's going on. This lever in the 0 position between the high and low, that's a neutral position. This is an on switch, so you have to have that over to the green eye in order to get power. This is also a kill switch. It's depressed right now because the machine is off, but when you are going to use it, it needs to be pulled out. And this lever here, it also has a neutral, so currently is in neutral. Down is forwards, up is backwards. So currently we have the belt on pulley A. So everything is going to be in this top bracket. If you have it on low and you have it in this arrow in this position, you're going to have 160 RPMs. If you have it in high, it's going to be 500. So when starting this tool up, make sure that your surface area or your work area is clean, and make sure that the chuck is in neutral and that everything is in the off position. So this should be at the 0, this should be depressed, that should be on the circle, and this should be in neutral as well. So when you are going to put material into the lathe, this is the chuck that is going to retract or compress the teeth, the jaws, and that will lock your material in place. So what we're going to do is we're going to put a piece of pipe in here just as an example so that you can see the way that you put material in safely and fire up the machine safely. We have a piece of pipe here. So what I'll do is I will back the jaws off far enough to get the pipe in, and then you want to tighten the jaws on the piece of material and never ever leave the chuck in the tool because that will cause damage. So when you do put the piece of pipe or the piece of material in the chuck, you want to make sure that it is tight. You don't have to crank it too hard, but tight enough that it's not going to come loose. And make sure that you go through all of the points that you can tighten the chuck with the tool and just make sure that they are all nice and tight. So now that we have our piece of material in the lathe, we're going to make sure that it is rotating the way we want. And this is a little bit off, so I would probably adjust that, but we're not actually going to take anything off this piece of pipe. So now that we know that the lathe is in neutral here, neutral, with that lever back there, we can now turn on the lathe. So what you would do is you pull that depression button, the safety. This is also like if something is happening with the lathe and you need to shut it off right away, you just hit this and it will kill the power for everything, which is great. So we can turn on the lathe, you can hear the electricity kick in the machine, and let's say we're going to do low. So we would change that gear. So if you can't quite get that in, you have to spin the chuck and it will lock in gear. Now the lathe is ready to turn. So we would, the final step to turn it on and actually cut the material would be this lever here. You pull it out, you press it down, and you're now going forward. So when the lathe is running, you want to make sure that you're out of the area of anywhere that you can get anything caught within this machine, and you're only using these instruments these dials in order to do the work that you're required to do. To shut it down, you put this in neutral. So after you're done cutting the material off the lathe, the shutdown process would be taking this lever, putting it in neutral, depressing this button to ensure that there's no more electricity going to the machine, putting that in neutral, that lever in neutral, and shutting the machine off. And all these steps should be done before you decide to take the chuck and loosen off the material and remove the project that you're working on, to ensure that nothing is going to get caught in the machine or it's not actually going to accidentally fire up. Yeah, and one very, very, very important thing while using this machine is you never ever change gears, these levers, when it's running. So you don't want to flip this from low to high or turn this dial while it's running. But yeah, basically any of the dials on this panel you don't want to touch while the lathe is running, because it will end up wrecking the machine internally. And so I want to apologize. We actually had this in the video. This board here should not be there when you're working on any material. The whole workspace should be free of anything that could get caught in the lathe for whatever reason. This board is here specifically to change the chuck, and we'll show you that in just a second. So after you're done with the lathe and you're done your project, make sure you sweep all the shavings off of the ways, the inside and in the catch down here, and dispose of them in the garbage. After that, there is what's called whey oil. After you've removed all the shavings off of the whey, take a cloth and wipe the ways clean. Then you just take a little bead of whey oil. It doesn't have to be much. You put it on the surfaces of the whey. Put the cap back on. Ooh. Cap back on. Oil back, and just cycle the lathe so that you lubricate and coat the ways. Now we're gonna change the chuck as well. There is a 4-jawed chuck here that you can replace the current chuck that is in the lathe with. Now, if you are going to do this, just know that the chuck is extremely heavy, and just to be careful, the reason why you put this board down is to protect the ways so that they don't get damaged, because it is a pretty precision machine. So now if you want to come in here, there's markings on these and see where it sits. Now this is tightened right now, and in order to loosen these off, there's 3 of them, you need to bring this mark in line with that mark. So I will do that right now for all 3 of them. You use the same chuck as you would for tightening the lathe, and see that's not super tight. You know, it's nice and snug, but you don't have to over tighten these. So that's in line now. So that one is loosened off. You will loosen that one off. That line's in line, and you're gonna see the chuck loosen off here once we do this. Whoa, is that 1, 2, 3? Oh, that's in line. There we go. So when you put the chuck back on, you want to make sure that the surfaces here are completely clean, and that the surface in here is completely clean as well, because this is going to, if there's any debris in here, that the chuck will actually sit a little off center, and that's not what you want when it comes to a lathe. Oh, and this surface as well. Okay. Perfect. So now in order to put that back on, you just gently slide all those back in. Hold it with one hand so it mates up properly, and tighten this line and just give it a good snug. Do the same for the second, the third, and just go back through and make sure that they are tight.